Hello, Grace Bible Church. Welcome to another edition of Living by the Book. I'm here with Pastor Rick, and today I have a question that I'm pretty excited to hear your answer on because I think it's a little bit of a tricky one. And Pastor Rick's smirking because obviously I already told him a little bit so he can try and prepare. But it's a tough one.
Yeah, we're talking literally 3 minutes ago.
Well, I don't want to give you too much time to prepare.
Yeah.
I mostly want what's on the top of your head, so I give minimal preparation time. The question is, everyone's been watching the riots that have been breaking out in a lot of different cities, particularly in the riots in Kenosha. There were instances of citizens arming themselves to protect their businesses or other people's businesses from rioters. There were several shootings that occurred. Some of them, in the name of self-defense, people shooting at rioters who were attacking them. I don't really want to talk about the riots right now. I think there's a time for that. I think we already have a little bit. What I was thinking about is I had a friend who once told me that if someone attacked him in that kind of situation, he would not feel it was appropriate to use force in self-defense because he's a Christian, because he knows where he's going when he dies. He doesn't fear death, but he doesn't know the eternal state of the person that might be attacking him. And so out of love and hope that maybe that person might someday hear the gospel and come to believe and be saved, he felt that it would be wrong of him to use force to defend himself, and so he would rather be killed than risk killing that other person. That's a pretty tough situation to put yourself in. But I'm curious: is my friend correct in thinking that way, or is it appropriate to use force? Not just for yourself, but in protecting your family. How do you think through something like that?
Right. Well, it is a difficult question because of our eternal orientation, and we know that death. It's appointed unto man once to die, and then after that comes judgment. And if somebody dies at your hand, clearly. That's a matter that has eternal consequence and is therefore of grave temporal importance. So I can appreciate that. I do believe that your friend has every right to think that way.
Okay.
I think that it's not wrong or sinful for him to think that way.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would have problem with him thinking that way is in what we understand to be the issue of the image of God, that everyone is made in the image of God, and as such, that there is a inherent value that is to be associated with life, and therefore, if somebody is threatening your life, the Scripture talks about the fact that they are lifting their hand up against the Lord, and so it's not only a self-defense, but it is a defense against those who lift themselves up against the Lord by seeking to do harm to another
Image bearer, right?
An image bearer. It may be argued, well, wouldn't you be doing harm to somebody who is in the image of God?
Right.
And my response to that would be that it's justified to those who take, or by extension seek to take, the life of a person, that their life themselves should be taken. So if they kill you, justice would mandate that they die.
Right. That's Genesis 9.
Right, Genesis 9.
Yeah.
So there's the understanding that it is a capital offense to murder.
Right.
But it is not a capital offense to defend life.
Right.
And so there's a distinction drawn between them. With reference to the awareness of the eternal issue, certainly your friend would not say, if a believer that I knew was a Christian was, doing something that I felt threatened, I would feel totally just in killing them. Or maybe even it's merciful to kill people, who are in Christ. So
get
you know where they're going.
Right.
Obviously he's not saying that.
Yeah.
But pushed to a logical extreme, that's where that conversation could go. So I think it confuses the responsibility with reference to that person's soul. It's not your responsibility.
Right.
They bear responsibility themselves for their behavior and their actions. And if they're striking out against God and the image of God in a hostile, murderous way, defending the image of God by your own life, and particularly those that God has charged you to protect,
Right.
with reference to a spouse or children, for a man, for instance, I think, there's a responsibility. One of the foremost responsibility of God-given authority is to protect the innocent and avenge the wicked. Now, not by vigilantism
Right.
at all.
Right.
That's the role of the government.
Right.
There are due processes that you have to go through. But if your life is in imminent danger and you cannot evade,
Right.
which, in California, if you get a concealed carry permit for a handgun or a firearm,
Yeah.
one of the things that is the foremost option is to flee.
Right.
You
Right.
evade. You,
Right.
cover.
Right.
If there's no cover. And you can't evade, and there's no cover, and there's no option, and your own life is in imminent danger,
Right.
then you're justified in,
Right.
shooting somebody.
Right. As a last resort.
As a last
Yeah.
resort. But if you take it as the first resort,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's not where you would go.
Right.
And so I think that vigilantism is not an appropriate thing. Rushing to kill people is not a thing. I certainly don't think that it's appropriate to kill other people for property.
Sure.
There was an age in our country's history where that was appropriate.
Right.
And even I think, don't quote me on this, but I think I read in my recent CCW refresher that life and property are defensible.
Right.
But in reality, only life is defensible.
Yeah.
Right?
Practically
So I think
speaking.
on the books it says life and property, but
Right.
in reality it's just life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are all these other laws, ancillary laws that trump the other laws and make it, you truly pay a penalty, even if it wasn't defense of your own
Right.
life.
Right.
You're going to pay a penalty.
Right.
So I think that the decision of a wicked person to perpetrate wickedness is on them, not on a person who defends
Right.
themselves or their family.
Right.
I don't believe that you can trade a life for things, but you can trade a life for a life. So
Okay.
if life is in danger, you're justified
Okay.
in self-defense.
Right.
If your property is in danger,
Got it.
it's an overkill,
Okay.
literally,
Literally. Yeah.
an overkill.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the value of the human exceeds the value of property.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that becomes an issue that differentiates between propriety
Yeah.
in using force to defend your property.
Right.
Lots of people would argue with me on that,
Sure.
but I think that that's the value of life, the sanctity of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
is placed into focus there.
Yeah.
It's interesting that in Romans chapter 13, it talks about the authority. There is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. So you want to have no fear of authority, do what is good, and you will have praise for the same. And then it says, for it is a minister of God to you for good, but if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. That is a reference to capital punishment.
Yeah.
The sword would be comparable in that day to the handgun or
Right.
firearm today.
Right.
So it's not armed in vain.
Yeah.
It will avenge itself against you.
Right.
And if you don't want to fear that, do what is good.
Yeah.
And so I think in the home, a man is the authority, according to God,
Yeah.
and has the responsibility to represent God in that home,
Right.
and all of the positive things of Christ-likeness, teaching morality,
Right.
rules of the home that all
Right.
advance righteousness and so on. That's his responsibility. But also to protect his home, as the leader of that home is to protect. And if someone comes in to a home to do mischief or harm to
Yeah.
the people in that home,
Right.
in that sense, he would not bear the sword in vain. He has
Right.
that ability to exercise justice
Right.
to make sure that the people
Yeah.
in his home are safe.
Yeah, and he's really an extension of God's
Right.
judgment
Exactly.
against that, and against evil.
Right.
That's
And
helpful.
in that sense, he's representing God.
Yeah.
And the authority for capital punishment is God's authority, and he's commanded it.
Right. Right.
And the further our society gets from the swift and fair application of that
Right.
law,
Right.
the more murderous we become.
Yeah.
So I think the deterrent that the death penalty is designed to provide is a joke today, because you go on death row and you stay there for 40 years,
Yeah. Forever.
Right. And very rarely is it are executions actually.
Right.
And I think that in itself is cruel. I think that there should be ample opportunity for a trial. There should be ample
Right.
opportunity for an appeal.
Right. Yeah. You
But
want
once
to
that's
get
done,
it right.
It should be
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
weeks,
Yeah.
not even months.
Right.
It should be within weeks. And if you started that, it would certainly be a deterrent to these kinds of
Right.
murderous, because you
Right.
think, I can murder somebody, and I might spend 10 years, but my hatred is so hot that it would be worth it.
Yeah.
But if they're facing hell
Yeah.
for it,
Yeah.
well, they are facing hell,
Right.
unless they convert, of course.
Right.
But if it's sooner rather than later, it's going to be a deterrent.
Yeah.
And they say, well,
Yeah.
studies show it's not a deterrent. Well, not if you let 40 years transpire. It's not.
Right. Right. It's too far
Oh
removed.
yeah, it's too far removed.
Yeah.
It'd be like telling your 2-year-old, next week I'm going to punish you for what you did today. Well, they're going to keep doing.
Yeah. I can very clearly imagine how that would go.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Right. No, that's really helpful. Yeah, that's helpful to think about, and I do. We see our society, like you said, moving away from the use of capital punishment. Do you think that means that Christians should arm themselves? Is that something that you would advocate for, that you would encourage? How do you think through that then? Just realizing that those kind of instances may be on the rise in our society.
Well, I think you have to count the cost.
Yeah.
Because, Jesus said it to Peter that those who lives by the sword will die by the sword.
Right.
And so there is a cost at arming oneself. And you have to count the cost for something like that.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think that it's, necessarily biblical to arm yourself.
Right.
I think it's biblical to protect yourself. I lock my doors at night.
Right.
I have cameras in my home for security.
Yeah.
That doesn't make me a person of small faith. It makes me a person who is wise,
Right.
and shrewd, taking advantage of means by which I'm able to defend my home and those in it. But when it comes right down to it, I think it needs to be a situation where you have no other choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to some of these people that are in the news, in Kenosha and other places, seemed to have been looking for a fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead of fleeing,
Right.
and they were looking for a fight.
Yeah, they put themselves in a situation where something bad was going to happen.
And
Seems
the
like-
brandishing laws in California, as an example, you can't pull your gun out
Right.
as a deterrent to people,
Right.
because that you can be accused of brandishing.
Right.
Which to me, I understand that you don't want to frivolously
Yeah.
scare people.
Right.
I think that, but in terms of a deterrent to advancement,
Right.
to threaten you.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that I fully appreciate the anti-brandishing laws as they currently stand.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because it seemed that if an aggressor is coming at you, you should be able to
just show
pull
them
a
what you
weapon
have. Yeah.
and
Right.
say, hey,
Right.
you really want to do this?
Right.
You know. And
Right.
of course, they get into you could have run or you could have, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not that fast.
You know. Yeah, that's the thing. But
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Well, I appreciate you talking us through that. You know, sadly, it just seems like more and more in our society, these are things we have to think about, which is, you know, a sad commentary on our country. At the same time, we're reminded that, you know, the light is brightest in the midst of darkness, and so we recognize that there's opportunity as well.
right, and I think that assuming responsibility for the eternal destination of a person who has made choices in their own lives to defy God and
Right.
and strike out against the image of God in another person,
Right.
to assume responsibility for that is an overreach.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not our,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's
It's
not
above our pay grade.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You know, the same arguments are for, you know, fighting in war and
Right.
other things,
Right.
and killing people that are just trying to defend themselves.
Right.
You know, but
Right.
at the authority and command of you know your government,
Right. Right.
you know, that becomes another issue. But I think the same principles apply.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it all makes me long for the day when Jesus returns and fixes everything in this world.
Amen.
And it is no longer the fallen world that we are so accustomed to. We long for that day. Church, I hope this conversation has blessed you. Obviously, very sobering things to have to think about, but I'm grateful, Pastor Rick, for your leadership once again in helping us think through them. Church, we love you, and we look forward to seeing you next week on another edition of Living by the Book.
Thanks.